Well, I am not able to adjust this like I'd like to. So what I'm going to do is, and I ask you to just forgive me, I am still working out this live Facebook piece. And I'm going to go ahead and proceed with what I want to share with you today. And then what I can do, and I do know how to do this, I can take it out, flip it around, and then put it back. And I'll repost it so it won't be on its side. But for right now, I'm going to end up doing it on its side, and I apologize for that. It's just one of those things where, the technology, as you learn to do new things, it's not always easy, and it gets very, very challenging. But I want to go ahead and get this done. I promised this a couple of weeks ago, and wasn't able to do it because of technology, and I just refuse to let the enemy stand in my way of getting done what I know God wants me to do. So anyway, I am going to go ahead and proceed. My name is Deborah Smith, and I'm excited to be here today with you. I am going to share with you today something that I learned that was so significant in changing relationships for me. So I want to talk about the language of love. And I'm actually reviewing a book, and this is going to come up probably a little bit backwards, a book called The 5 Love Languages by Gary Chapman. Gary Chapman, The 5 Love Languages. This is one of the best books I have read on relationships, and it really teaches a great deal of information on what we should be looking for when we're dealing with trying to communicate to our family members, whether it's our children, whether it's our spouse or whatever, or a friend, and make sure that they feel loved. We have this saying, and you've probably heard this saying as well as I have, that, treat someone the way you want to be treated. And that is good in many ways. But when you're talking about love languages, that is not going to get you where you need to go. Because when you treat somebody the way you want to be treated, the question is that the way they want to be treated? Because if it's not, you're not building the relationship. You're actually starting to tear it down and don't even know it. So the first thing I want to do is, and I'm taking this again right out of the book, The 5 Love Languages by Gary Chapman, and just sharing some parts and aspects of it that I think will just help you to know how important this book is, that if you don't have it, buy it. And you can get it on Amazon, you can get it at the bookstores. I mean, it's readily available, been out a long time. Okay, so the first love language I want to talk about is the words of affirmation. Words of affirmation. Words of affirmation are verbal compliments that we give people because we care about them and we want them to know that they are appreciated. I'm just looking to see if that writing is coming out right, and it is. And so it's verbal compliments. So we compliment them on what they do. And we just make sure that when we compliment them, that we make sure that we do a different compliment every day. And we want to do it in a way that is genuine. Because if it's not genuine, we know. Sometimes we can pretend, oh yeah, I was genuine, and go, yeah, no, I wasn't. Because people can tell when you're genuine and when you're not. And my son is really interested because he can feel me. So he can feel when I shift. And so he can tell whether things are good or things are bad, or whether I mean what I say or whether I don't, whether I'm struggling with something. So, and some of our spouses and our children are the same way. They can feel how we are. So if we're not genuine, they will know it. So we want to make sure we compliment and give those verbal compliments for what they're doing. And that is such a great feeling when someone's love language is the words of affirmation. So let me just tell you quickly all 5 love languages, and then we'll come back and go into them in detail. So words of affirmation is the first one. Quality time is another one. Gifts is one. Acts of service, and then physical touch. So on the words of affirmation, so we're supposed to be giving affirmation, confirming them, letting them feel good about themselves, letting them know we appreciate them. Now, the problem and caution we need to have with words of affirmation is if we are using nagging words. So if we're nagging, that is not going to help them to feel like we appreciate them, and they're not going to feel loved. If we're using negative words, you know, telling them they're no good, they're never going to be any good, they're never going to amount to anything, those words are detrimental to someone who is just, you know, they have a different love language. But think about this. If you've got somebody who lives and their whole essence of who they are is about words of affirmation and needing that affirmation at a very deep level in their spirit, and you're nagging at them or you're giving them negative words, I'll tell you what that does to them. What that does to them, it's like in their heart, it's like taking a knife and stabbing it in their heart. It is literally like you're just, and what you're doing is you're taking the words of affirmation should be making them look and feel very happy. Instead, what those words are doing is that they're taking that person and they're cutting them to the core, and they're turning them sadder and sadder and sadder inside. So we need to be careful, because if we have children or even spouses who their whole thing is words of affirmation, when we do the nagging words and the negative words, we're literally putting daggers into their heart, and we're breaking their heart every time we do it. Now, with children, I'm not saying we don't correct our children. We correct our children, but we got to understand to keep things in perspective, because we should have also many times when we're doing a lot of affirmations to build them up and let them know how much we love them. So that's words of affirmation. The next one I want to talk about is quality time. Now, quality time. Quality time, I think we think quality time is watching TV and they're in the room. And that's really not quality time. Because if they don't have our undivided attention, that's not quality time. So now if you decide to go to a movie together, which my son and I, we like to go to movies together, but we decide what movie to go to. And when I really want to love on him, I go to a movie that I know he's going to like. So I'll save my girl flicks for the girlfriends, and I will go watch an action pack or, you know, Transformers or something like that, which I like those too. But he really likes them. And so when I go with him, then I'm going to, you know, I'm going to do that. But I also spend time in addition to that afterwards, talking about what we liked about the movie. Maybe we'll run some errands together and just kind of hang out together. And to him, that is quality time. Now, if that didn't feel like quality time to him, I wouldn't do it, because it's all about them. You see, it's got to be from their perspective. So quality time, go to lunch together, just you and them. Go for a walk together. If it's a spouse, hold hands. If it's your kids, hold hands. I know sometimes my son, he just loves to just kind of take my hand and we'll walk, you know, and doesn't matter how big he gets, how old he gets, he enjoys doing that every now and then. Or go to a weekend in the mountains. Go for a weekend in the mountains where you can just hang out and spend quality time together. And that stuff is just really reaches into the heart of somebody who is really a very, whose love language is quality time. So then you make them very happy by doing that. Now, what are some of the cautions that we have when we're not doing quality time right? So some of the cautions we have is the eye contact. If you're not making eye contact, then you're not having the impact you think you're having. Because sometimes we think, oh, well, I did this and I did that for them. I don't understand why it didn't work. This is why it didn't work. That's why I'm sharing this with you, because this is why it doesn't work. Because we're not doing it, one, from their perspective, and we're not doing it with a whole heart. We need to listen for feelings. So if we're not listening for feelings and we're trying to fix, then we're not listening. Because it's not about fixing them. It's about listening to them and letting them know they have been heard. So reflect back on what you're sensing from them, that they're feeling about it, and just leave it there and don't try and fix. And don't problem solve. Don't try and solve the problem, because again, solving problems, and us ladies, we know this really well. Solving our problems is not listening to us, right? And so we want to be careful not to do that. If we don't do the eye contact, if we're not listening to them and we're trying to fix, again, we're going to have that opposite effect, and we're going to literally be putting that knife into their heart, and instead of having them be happy because we're doing quality time, we've got them being very sad because the quality time is not helpful to them. It's not beneficial to them. It doesn't feel well. Okay? So that's quality time. The next one I want to talk about is receiving gifts. Receiving gifts. Now, this is a visual symbol of love. It can be a gift of self. So say, for instance, you've got a relationship with even your children. You're running pillar and post throughout the week and you just have no time together and stuff. And maybe the greatest gift for that kid is just to spend some quality time with them doing what they love. So that can be a gift to them as well. Or you can buy a gift, and it doesn't have to be an expensive gift, but it does have to be a gift that they want. Kind of like what we do around Christmas time, right? We have them make a list of all the stuff they want, and you get something off the list. And that, to them, is a gift that they want. You give somebody a gift that they don't want, then they're like, okay, that's nice, but doesn't mean anything. And we're like, well, I gave you this and I gave you that. No, 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 no. It's not about giving what you want. It's about giving what they want and what they want to receive. And so the caution areas there is that if you are a saver or an investor and you love to save your money, this is going to be a problem, because your love language is to save and invest, but their love language is to receive the gifts. And if you don't spend any money to help with, to give those gifts, and that is their language, then you're not meeting their needs, you're meeting your own needs. That's a caution. And you want to make sure that you're meeting theirs. What is their list? I had my son recently. I was like, what kind of things do you like? What kind of things do you want to get? And he made a list of those things. And I didn't tell him I was doing it, but his birthday was coming up. And so I looked on the list. And so one of the things was like, okay, I'll get that for him. And I got that for him. He was totally happy because it was something he wanted. Now, what if I had just taken something that he didn't want? And when we do that, we're taking again, we're turning that happy place into a sad place. And again, we're putting a dagger into their heart. And I'll tell you, I don't think we realize how damaging these daggers in the heart are over a period of time. So when you have relationships that aren't working, think about some of these things. Okay, the next one I want to talk about. So far we've talked about affirmations. We've talked about quality time, and now we're going to talk, and we've talked about receiving gifts, now acts of service. So acts of service can vary depending on the person and what they need. Now, say for instance, when you're talking about spouses, say for instance, you got a spouse that's just really like say the wife hasn't had a chance to clean the house, or the guy hasn't had a chance to clean the house, and everything has really been really busy. Then what can happen is the other spouse can clean the house for them. And because they're like, oh man, I need this house cleaned. Oh, I need the house cleaned, but I don't have time. I need the house cleaned. Well, hello, listen to that. Because they're saying, and especially if their love language is acts of service, then clean the house. And that is a gift to them. Or you can say, or if, it's like, I'm tired of eating out, but I don't have time to fix dinner. Well, fix dinner. And there you go. That is, in itself, would be an act of service. Or they've got tons of lists of all the things they need to get done. They need to go to the cleaners. They need to go to the grocery store. They need to go to the other store and pick up this and pick up that and stuff. I mean, you can go to the cleaners so you can run those errands for them. Those are acts of service. And so we need to make sure that we're doing the things that they perceive. And then your children, you want to... when you have the time, like they'll say to you maybe, okay, Mom, when you have time, can we do this? Can we do that? Can we go to the zoo when we have time? Now to them, taking them to the zoo could be spending quality time with them, but it could be acts of service as well for them, especially if they're asking for it. So depending on what category that falls in for them. And so when you want to be cautious. A-U-T-I-O-U-S. Cautious, spelling cautious, okay? Cautious. Oh, okay, cautious. Make sure it's what they like. They have to like it, because if they don't like it and want to do it, then that's not quality for them. And do it well. If you're not going to do it well, you really ought to almost not be doing it, because it's not going to have the impact you think it's going to have. And again, if you don't do it well, you're literally putting that dagger into the heart, and you're taking what should be quality acts of service and turning it into a sad thing. And that is not going to help the relationship whatsoever. Okay, so that's acts of service. The next one I want to talk about is physical touch. So physical touch. When we have someone who has a love language of physical touch, they need to be held, they need to be hugged, and they need to be kissed. And if it's a spouse, holding hands, kissing, embracing, that intimacy is part of their physical touch. So when we're like, okay, don't touch me, get away from me, we need to be careful with that. If that's their if the physical touch is one of their high languages for love, though that's a dagger going deeper into them than you realize. So we've got to be careful. Now, if it's physical touch is not one of their high love languages, then it's not going to hit as hard. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Okay. And so you want to make sure that this love language is one to me that you need to do daily. We need to daily be hugging and kissing and loving on our kids. Now, the other thing is that we're not going to be able to do that just when they turn teenagers. You wait till they turn teenagers and you got a problem with them, and all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, I want to hug them, I want to touch them, and then. It's like, and they're like, get away from me, because they haven't seen it all this time, and all of a sudden you want to do it. So we want to make sure that this is a pattern that we have developed from the time that they're young. So start early. Start as babies, loving on them, kissing on them, hugging on them. Really get that touch in there, because when you do it when they're babies, they grow up expecting it. Now, they may get to a place where they start showing you that that's not something they want, but then you can assess it and find out maybe they have a different love language, and then you can flip it. But that still doesn't mean that you shouldn't hug and kiss them. You should still do it. You just don't do it a lot, and you do it knowing that that's not necessarily that's not their primary love language. The other thing is, if it's abusive, can you imagine what it's like for a child or even a spouse whose primary love language is physical touch, which should make them very happy, as we've said, right? And instead, you are abusive, you are, harming them, you're hurting them, you're hitting them, even like poking them in the chest, that kind of stuff. That is going to take, and that little heart, or that heart, is going to have a dagger in it again, and it's going to really reach to the core of who that person is. And so what we're doing is we're really harming the person more than we're helping them. Do you understand how this is going in the wrong direction and how we're causing bigger problems than we realize? If somebody's love language is not physical touch, then if you're not speaking nice to them and you're kind of getting on that edge of abusive, it may not reach to the core of them too much. Now, of course, you keep doing it. Obviously, that's going to be a problem. But the least little bit, when their primary love language is physical touch, is really going to go to the core of who they are. And I'll tell you, you're harming them day by day and not necessarily realizing. So like say for instance, if you slap a kid, I don't believe in physical abuse. I think we should correct our kids another way. Now, I don't believe in sparing the rod and spoiling the child. But I believe that, we need to correct our children. But I think we need to be careful because a lot of parents are doing it out of anger and not out of correction. And I know because I grew up under that heavy hand of anger. And I'll tell you, that is just not a good feeling. And I'm so sensitive anyway that my mom could have looked at me the wrong way. And I would have just lined back up. And my son's the same way. He's very sensitive. And so if you look at him the wrong way, he wants to line back up. And so when we're abusive to kids like that, we're hurting them even more. So we need to be very careful what we're doing. And so I really don't push the physical correction too much because I think people don't understand it at all and they're doing it kind of in the wrong way. So I'm just going to say that way. So anyway, but that doesn't mean we don't correct our kids because our kids need to know that we run the house and we will correct their behavior however we need to. So what I've shared with you is the 5 love language. We talked about affirmation. Words of affirmation. We talked about quality time. We talked about receiving gifts. We talked about acts of service. And the 5th one we talked about was physical touch. Okay, those are the 5 love languages by Gary Chapman. And those are important in how we do things because we've got to figure out, and you're probably saying, so how do I figure out which is my love language and which is their love language? Now, one of the ways to do it is just get the book. And the nice thing about the book is, in the back, there's a question profile for the spouse, the woman, and there's one for the man. And so you can do the survey and see how you rank. The other thing that you can do, other than that, is he has several books that are listed in the back here. There's one for children, there's one for teenagers, so you can really zero in. If you're having trouble with your teenagers, get the book and figure them out, because if you start speaking their love language, they're going to hear you. They're going to listen because it goes down to the deepness of who they are and not just kind of empty words. So you can do the assessment and figure it out. The way this worked for me was that my son, I had him do the quiz, and his primary love language is words of affirmation. And I'll tell you, when I did the survey with him, I should have known. It was words of affirmation. You know why? Because he would say to me, Mom, are you proud of me? Mom, aren't you proud of me for this? Mom, aren't you proud of me for that? And I went, oh my gosh, he's been saying it all along and I didn't even hear it. So somebody that won't do the survey or you can't do the survey with, listen to their words, and their words will tell you what their primary, whatever they say the most is likely their primary love language. His second love language is physical touch. And he'll tell me how he wants that done. Like I thought giving him just a gentle little kiss on the forehead was great, right? Every night before I go to bed, little kiss on the forehead. And you know what he said to me? He said, Mom, he said, instead of doing the light one, he said, could you just like do it real solid? I'm like, okay. And so you know what? I did what he said. Why? Because that's his love language. And so, because it's not about me, what I wanted, it's about what he wanted. And I'll tell you, it works great. And he let me know, yes, I'm doing good, or no, I'm not doing so good with it. And so anyway, our children, our spouses will let us know if we will listen because they say it in their words. And now the other one is his quality time. So then every now and then we'll hang out together, or back on the physical touch, he'll say, yeah, give me a hug. You know, I haven't had a hug in a while. And so I hug him when he wants to be hugged. Sometimes I'll do it just because I want to be hugged. And he's okay with that. But again, I do primarily what his primary love language is. Now, for me, my primary love language is physical touch. So now I need the hugs. So this is when church is coming great, because I can get there with the sisters in Christ and I can get my hugs, you know, since my spouse has passed away. So I can get my hugs that way, and I can get my hugs from my son. So that works for me. The second one that I have is quality time. So if somebody wants to love on me, spending quality time, going out, hanging out, for me, hanging out with a movie and talking about the movie and going to eat afterwards. So it's not just the movie, because then we're focused on the movie. But if we go out to eat afterwards and talk about the movie and talk about, you know, things that we want to talk about, that for me is quality time. And that works great for me. So those are my two primary ones. And knowing what you need, like say, for instance, one year my son said to me, so Mom, what do you want for your birthday? And you know what the first words out of my mouth was? Quality time. I want to hang out together, so let's go spend the day together. Let's go to the movie and do this and do that and stuff. And so I had a little list of things that I wanted to do. And so that was my love language. Now, the other thing is, and I mentioned this earlier, make sure that we start these things early on. People, we don't realize that all of us have an emotional tank. And that tank needs to be filled up as much as possible. Many of us are walking around with empty tanks and wondering why we're miserable. So we need to fill our kids' tanks up, and we need to fill each other's tanks up, and appropriately, of course. And if we don't, our kids will find a way to get attention if we don't give it to them through their love languages appropriately. They will even act up and have bad behavior just to get our attention, so they get something from us. Let's not have them do that. Let's give them what they need in the language that they need it, and it will speak to their hearts, and then they won't need to act up. And spouses too. Spouses, if they feel unloved, they will go somewhere else to get it. So you don't want your spouse doing that, right? So speak the love languages that works for them. And then they won't need to go anyplace else. The other thing is too, and I mentioned this, is start early. Start with your kids when they're little. Get this book. You know, this is a great book. Or get the children's one and give it to someone who just had a baby. You know, get to someone who's married. These are great gifts to give people that's going to literally change their life and make their life better. My mom was not real good. She's passed on now. She passed on in February. And I'm still working through that. But because I miss her a lot. But my mom she didn't grow up with parents that did a lot of physical touch. And so she was not into physical touch. Like really not into physical touch. And so I remember when I used to hug her, she would just sit there and she would just like,
she'd start cringing, you know, and start like, are we done yet? I mean, she just, in the beginning, she couldn't even say that. She just would want me to let go. And I knew it, so I would let go. After a while, we started talking about it. And I said, you know, Mom, I know that you're not into real long hugs. I said, but I am. I really need the hugs. And so, you know, can you hug me just a little bit longer? And so we got into the place where I'd hug her, and she would just hold on for a little bit longer, and then go, are we done yet? You know, kind of thing. And if I wasn't done, you know, I'd go just a little bit more, and then I would let go, because I didn't want to push it, because then it's starting to feel uncomfortable for her. But before she passed away, we got to the place where I could get almost the hug that I needed, because it just wasn't her love language. And it was just something she wasn't very comfortable doing, but it was something that I needed. And so she was finally able to do some of that. So it doesn't matter when you start. What matters is you start, and start today. Find out, listen for your children and your spouse. What is their love language? Get the book, 5 Love Languages by Gary Chapman, and use this book. Don't just put it on the shelf and one day decide to read it. If your marriage is a little bit kind of not quite where you want it, read the book. If your marriage is great, read the book. If your marriage is not good, read the book. If you're struggling with your kids, read the book. If your kids are doing well, read the book. If you've not read this book, this is a book everybody needs to read to literally transform your relationships. So when you speak the love language, you're speaking their language and not your own. Guys, thank you so much for being here today. Sorry the video is on its side. I will pull it down, flip it, and put it back so it'll be right side up. And then I would ask you to share this video with other people, because there's a lot of people starved for affection. That's another quick story I want to tell you before we leave. It's people that are starved for affection, and they're not getting their needs met. And besides the not hugging thing, you know, there was some other issues that went on in our family. And I did not get some of the loving that I needed in the right way, appropriate way. It was a lot in inappropriate ways. And so I struggled through that for many, many years. And as I was working through that, I finally got to a place where God said to me, literally, I was on my way to church, getting out of the car, getting ready to walk toward the building. And God said to me, you are no longer starved for affection. And I just went, wow. Now for God to tell me that, oh my gosh, did that feel so good. And what that meant to me was, He was filling me up with what I didn't have when I was little. He was filling me up with from Him. So He balanced me out. And I had His love that was unconditional. I literally, when my husband had passed away, I said, God, you've taken my husband. I have nobody to hug like that anymore. I need to know that you're there. I don't want to just hear you. I want to literally feel you holding me again, right? I've got that physical touch, number one, right? And so I needed to know that I was sitting on God's lap and He was holding me. And that's what I asked Him for when my husband passed away. Guess what He did? And I remember actually a couple of times that things were really hard and difficult. And I felt like I was sitting on God's lap and He had His arms wrapped around me and He was holding me. And I'll tell you, that felt so good. God knows how to speak our love language. And if we're children of God, and even if we're not, we need to learn how to speak others' love languages that we love. The other thing God said to me, and it was related to my mother, so it's relationships, so I'll share it, is that we had worked through our relationship over the years and stuff. We had some bad times, we had some good times, and anyway, it was a long, challenging relationship, but we came out the other side, and God was gracious to walk us through that step by step. When my mom passed away, and I was up there kind of helping my brothers and sisters to kind of clean things up, this is what God put on my heart. He said, you ran the race. You finished your course. You won. And I went, now I'm not big on affirmations per se, but when God tells you, you finished the race and you did a good job, and it's a relationship that you worked on all your life, there's nothing like that. And that made me feel so good. Didn't mean it was easy, but God recognized what I had worked to do and tried my best to obey him, and it worked out. Relationships are worth healing, mending, and building. Keep yourself safe, but let the relationship heal, mend, and use the 5 love languages by Gary Chapman to get there. Thank you guys so much. I won't give you any more stories, and love you, appreciate you, and I'll be doing some more videos and figure all this stuff out ahead of time. It'll get better. So anyway, thank you again, and have an awesome Saturday and a great Sunday as well.